How's it going, Reef Keepers? All right, so this is the first episode of the series that I'm going to take a shot at producing for people to learn about how to go about, I guess, their journey into reef keeping, their initial journey into reef keeping. So this is my main display tank right here. It is an 80-gallon display tank with a 30-gallon sump underneath. It is a peninsula style tank, right? As you can see straight through both sides. So peninsula style tank has 3 sides to it and an overflow on one short end. So I lost a battle to have this be arranged in a different spot in the house. I'm not gonna go there, but basically I ended up with it on my living room wall, and that's just fine. I really enjoy it anyway, and I still love the peninsula style. And that's actually the first thing I'm gonna cover in this series is deciding on the size and style of your reef tank. And there's a few different things to consider here. So conventional knowledge in the hobby states that you should go bigger if in doubt, right? You should just go bigger, and bigger is better, okay? And I think that that is a gross oversimplification, okay? Bigger, in my unesteemed opinion, bigger is also a lot harder and a lot more time consuming. It is easier in one critical aspect, and that is keeping your parameters of your water stable. It is much easier to keep your water parameters stable. I will grant the big tank proponents that point. I concede that point. However, I basically set aside half a day every week that is just for maintenance. So like every Saturday, from the minute I wake up at like 7 a.m. until lunchtime, I am maintaining this tank, right? I'm scraping the overflow, I'm scraping off the wave makers, I'm scraping the glass, I'm taking a brush to the rock work for any algae that I see, I'm stirring the sand bed, I'm swapping out filter media, I'm refilling food, I'm dusting off lights. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I actually literally have a list on my phone, something I recommend reef keepers do. Create a list that you stick by every week and be militant about it, and you won't succeed in the hobby without a militant maintenance routine. So the investment that you must put into your maintenance routine has to be a consideration with regards to tank size. Now, prior to this 80-gallon display tank, I had a 25-gallon all-in-one. That was well manageable every week with a couple hours of hard maintenance on Saturday morning. Totally different, right? Less than half the time, maybe even a quarter of the time some days that it takes me to maintain this tank. Now, of course, 25 gallons versus 80 gallons is a massive difference, right? It's a massive difference in water stability. It's a massive difference in the amount of coral that you can put in the tank and the amount of fish and other livestock that you can put in the tank. It is a massive difference in the amount of chemicals or supplements that you dose to the reef tank. And so it is a completely different experience, and I would contend it's a much easier experience to start with a modest size tank. Were I to do it over again, I may get something like a 40-gallon tank, about half the size of this. 25, I really ran out of room quickly. But part of purchasing a tank for you, along with the reputation of the company and the style of tank you want, whether you want a black back with an overflow in the very back where it sits against the wall, or a peninsula style tank with an overflow in one of the short ends where you can see through, 2 long sides of the tank and a short side. Those are aesthetics, right? And those are, company reputations and stuff like that. And I think people get caught up focusing on that, and they just default to a larger style tank. And then the amount of maintenance surprises and crushes them, and they wash out of the hobby. Similarly, you get washouts from smaller tanks. If you get a 10-gallon tank and you're like, I'm gonna launch into the hobby like this, it is so unstable sometimes, and it's so difficult to get into a testing routine and figure out what you should be dosing to keep your corals alive, and troubleshoot why things are failing. If you're struggling, a lot of washouts, I think, tend to happen on the very, low size end as well. Something 25, 30 to 50 gallons, in that range, I think is probably more often than not a safe range for people to start in. Now, it's different for everybody, right? You may have a situation that allows you a ton of time to sink into this. You may have, somebody who can come and help you. You have the means to pay someone from a local fish store to come and check in with you every week while you get things booted up. There's all different factors that go into this, but for the average person who's entering the hobby and is like, I don't really have a ton of money to spend on this. I've set aside some money, and I can't just sink money into coral and fish and watch them die over and over and over again. I don't have that kind of, account behind me. And I need to, be confident in what I'm doing and make it work. Again, somewhere in that 25 to 50 gallon range, I think is pretty safe. So yeah, different impacts. The money that you must put into it changes as you get bigger, of course. Not just from like the amount of salt you're using, the amount of supplements you're using, the amount of rock you need to fill the tank. You're looking at stuff like lighting, right? Like the bigger it gets, the longer it gets, the more lights you're going to need to properly cover the coral. Also, the bigger the wave makers, or the greater the number of wave makers. This stuff isn't cheap. It never was cheap, and it's less cheap now than it probably ever has been. It's extremely expensive. That's part of the reason my maintenance routine is so militant, is to make sure my equipment is safe and functional and long lasting, because I just don't have the money to endlessly sink into equipment. So the smaller you get, you can get away with potentially one power head, one wave maker, or no wave makers, depending on the strength of your return pump. Your return pump can be weaker and smaller, right? Doesn't need to be as expensive. You could get away with maybe one light, a Kessel A80, right? Instead of, needing, serious spectrum, serious spread lights. All of this has to be taken into account. And I can't stress the importance for most people. Something I didn't do and I regretted not doing is sitting down and saying, okay, I need to really research the size of this tank in conjunction with what kind of equipment I may need and what kind of corals I eventually want to grow. Have a game plan before you pull the trigger. This tank here, I had just moved across the country, and I had taken everything from my 25 gallon and shoved it into a tub with one single Kessel light over it. And I was doing like a 50% water change every day to keep everything from dying in this plastic tub. I had no game plan. I was in utter panic, starting a new job. It was a mess of a time. And I pulled the trigger on this tank, and I was very fortunate that it worked out. I love the size of this tank. It's a 4 foot by 20 inch deep, 21 inch deep maybe, by 21 inch tall, something like that tank. And it's perfect for me. But what I didn't account for was I'm gonna need so much more or bigger of all equipment to cover a tank this size. And here it comes, and instantly I realized, oh my God, I'm halfway there. Now I need to buy all this equipment to go behind it. So again, very, very critical to have a game plan going into it. So carefully selecting the style of tank that you want and understanding what all that entails and what ripple effect that's going to have on the equipment and the amount of sand and rock and such that you need for the tank. It is a first step that you cannot afford to take a misstep on. If you do, it is your likelihood of giving up on this hobby and selling everything for half of what you bought it for as it depreciates is astronomical. So if you have questions about different tank styles, different tank sizes, what my experience is with nano tanks versus this, full-bodied tank that I've got now, lighting flow, etc., I will cover those in future episodes, but if you want to ask now, like if you're kind of launching into this and you're going to look forward to episode after episode coming out and kind of charting your own progress through your journey along with this, please feel free to ask things ahead of time before episodes post. I am super diligent about responding to everyone, and I respond as intelligently and as honestly as I can. I'm a teacher in real life, so it's like, my day job is teaching young people, and I get great joy from having conversations with people that further knowledge. So you're not putting me out. Feel free to ask anything, and if you want to come along for this journey, please like and subscribe. The support helps. Thanks, guys.